Hey everybody, welcome to the Mana Leak. I'm John as always, and today we're just going to do a little bit of a Grand Prix Montreal recap, because of course I was there this past weekend. Grand Prix, for anybody who doesn't know, is basically the highest level of Magic that you can play without being invited. So it's below the Pro Tour, it's below Worlds, things like that, but it's still pretty high level. It's competitive REL, which means there are judges, there are penalties, etc. But they're huge events. They attract a number of people. The biggest one ever was in Vegas recently, which attracted nearly 8,000 people. Grand Prix Montreal, however, was a fair bit smaller at 1,000 and something, low thousands. First off, wow, Montreal is a bit of a nightmare. I have never been there before on my own or driving. I went on a school trip maybe 15 years ago, and that was about my only Montreal experience. It's a heck of a city to get around, and I barely was in it. I stayed in Brossard, a small-ish city south of Montreal, about a 15-minute drive if you're lucky. Which was much easier getting around, and getting into Montreal, I was in, maybe 5 minutes inside of Montreal. That 15-minute drive, however, when I went to go Friday night, took 1 hour to get from Brossard, my hotel, to the venue in Montreal. Plus, finding out where the heck I parked was difficult as well. And unfortunately, I missed signing up for the large, mega last chance trial, and I had to sign up for just a regular single elimination one, which kind of sucked, but more on that trial a little bit later. Overall, the event was really well run. Gamekeeper did a really good job. Everything started on time. There was very little lag between rounds. The round would end. Players would play out their last 5 turns, and usually pairings were up within maybe 15 minutes after the end of time announcement, which is very impressive. The last Grand Prix I went to, Grand Prix Toronto 2 years ago, was miserable. There was half an hour to an hour between rounds. These guys did a really good job. Plus, they had online pairings, which wasn't advertised. I had to find out by noticing it on the Twitter hashtag GP Montreal. But they actually posted, even before the sheets were, physically posted in the venue, they posted the pairings online, and everybody had their own personal website as well, or URL, where you could just get your pairing, just refresh the page, and there's your table. So as soon as I figured that out, which was like round 3, I managed to stop shoving my way through crowds to try to look at the little piece of paper to find out what table I was at, and was able to just calmly and casually walk to my table and be there long before my opponent ever was. So good job, Gamekeeper. Great, really well run event. However, the event was a little bit small. Turnout was a little bit lacking. Low 1,000 seems a little bit low for a sealed Grand Prix. My guess is it was a combination of Dragons of Tarkir being on the way out. People are tired of it. A lot of people don't want to pay $60 to go to a sealed Dragons of Tarkir event. Plus, it was the July 4th weekend, which I imagine meant a lot of Americans who would have traveled up didn't, because they probably had other much more fun plans. Most of the pros weren't there. Reed Duke was there. Ari Lax was there. The Canadians were there. Mana Deprived, Alexander Hayne, and Pascal Menard, of course, were having their show off. But overall, the turnout was a little bit lacking, and the vendors seemed a little bit lacking as well. There weren't nearly as many as the last Grand Prix I went to in Toronto, and their stock levels were significantly lower. I don't know if that's just how a Grand Prix in Montreal would be compared to one in Toronto, or if it was also this sort of predicted low turnout becoming true, meaning that people just didn't show up or bring much product. That being said, the prize wall was great. Every side event gave out tickets, and you could take those tickets to the prize wall and turn them into prizes, booster packs, expensive cards. There were original dual lands and things like that there. Funko Pop Planeswalker action figures, old fat packs, you name it. If you had the tickets for it, you could turn them into cool prizes. Just an impressive number of artists as well. I think there were 5 artists ultimately, maybe even 6. Pretty well-known artists as well. Not, RK Post or Noah Bradley level of known artists, but still decently well-known. I strongly considered buying the alternate art Judge's Familiar from Ryan Yee, which I use as my MTGO avatar, and you know, kind of has a connection to me because I am a judge in Magic. But I ended up not, and I might kick myself for that in the future. But anyways, that's enough of a quick recap. Let's take a look at the two events that I attended, the Last Chance Trial and, of course, the main event. So the first thing I did on Friday night when I got there was hop into a Last Chance Grand Prix Trial in a sealed event. Basically, these are just like a Grand Prix trial, except instead of being a scheduled date and time at a local store before the event, these are the night before the event, and they just fire and fire and fire and fire as people join up for them, trying desperately to win those 2 buys. So I hopped on into my pool and I took a look at what I had, and what I've got laid out here is kind of the stuff that's okay in the colors I didn't play. Blue was pretty weak. Whisk Away, Ojutai's Breath, Palace Familiar. Those were kind of the cards that made me say, hey, those are good in blue. 3 cards obviously isn't quite what you're really looking for. Following that up, and sorry for the shaky camera, I wasn't quite sure how I could film this exactly, but we had a Ruthless Deathfang that, hey, maybe bled into black a little bit. If there was enough black stuff, I could play a little bit of blue. In black, we had Merciless Executioner, Defeat, Orc Sure Shot, Hand of Silumgar, getting a bit better. All solid cards, but again, only 4 cards really drawing me into that color. Over there in red, we can see Twin Bolt, Hardened Berserker, which is kind of a fringe include there, I would say, and Calcisma Behemoth. Again, not very much going on red in this pool. And then, of course, we had a Savage Ventmaw in red-green. Now, you may be noticing that white and green are missing. That's because they were the colors that I played. I do just want to briefly show you, if I can get them in frame, the garbage rares that I got in this pool. That was the wrong zoom. There we go, zoom out. 3 of my 6 rares were Radiant Purge, Assault Formation, and Commune with Lava. Basically unplayable. Maybe Assault Formation is arguably the best that you could play, but I feel like that's something you have to kind of fool around with in draft in order to be really good. The rest of the pool wasn't that exciting. There were a lot of rune marks, a lot of really middling creatures, a lot of garbage spells, Tassiger's Cruelty, Grave Strength, Mind Rot, Ancestral Vengeance. These are all things that I'm seeing as I just quickly go through them. Double resupply. Not great stuff going on in the pool in blue, black, red. But green-white was pretty decent, and let's see if I can get the whole pool in here. Might require a bit of zooming out. It'll require me shoving this chair out of the way. And here we go. I think you can see the pool. Yeah, green-white is what I went with, a little tiny splash for ultimate price. So looking at the 2-drops, we've got ourselves a Whisperer, Herald of Dromoka, Enoch Guide to Dromoka Warrior, and a Soul Summons. None of those are awesome. They're all just kind of decent 2-drops, what you would expect from a relatively normal 2-drop. Spell-wise, we have the aforementioned Ultimate Price, the Epic Confrontation, and Artful Maneuver. Pretty solid 2-drop spells. In fact, very solid in the case of Ultimate Price and Epic Confrontation. Over on 3, we see at the top, we've got one of my other rares, a Monastery Mentor, which, boy, let me tell you, that card can do some work. Misthoof Kirin, also very good. Double Airy Bowmasters, a Herd Chaser Dragon, which is a little bit more fringy, and Salt Road Quartermasters. Down in the spells, we've got a Ruthless Instincts, which I played begrudgingly. I'm not a big fan of that spell, to be honest. And a Sandblast, which I am a big fan of. For our 4 spells, we've got Scale Blessing, which I played both in this deck and in my main event deck, and was generally impressed with it. It can do some work. It's definitely a dead card sometimes. If you have no creatures, it's a dead card. It doesn't help you late game when you're struggling a little bit. But if you have any creatures down, it's at least 2 +1/+1 counters. And if you've megamorphed or done anything, it's a number of +1/+1 counters. Up in the creature slot for 4, we have just a Formless Nurturing. Over in 5, we've got an Aven Tactician, Enduring Victory, Pinion Feast, which I did main deck. There's enough flyers going around in Sealed that I think Pinion Feast is a main deckable card. And finally, another rare in Sandstep Mastodon. I just realized I think I might be missing a rare. It must be in the pool of garbage stuff. But yeah, that was my deck, and it did pretty well when I got to play. So what do I mean by that? Well, first off, it was a single elimination tournament, meaning when you lost your match, you were out. Match 1, I was up against another green-white deck. It relied very heavily on Dragon Herald, the 2/2 with Vigilance for 3 that has Prowess. He had 2 of them out. He would get them out on turns 2 and turn 3 and turn 4. And then he would just load up the spells. Center Soul, Artful Maneuver, tons of rebounding cheap spells, and these guys got through for a large amount of damage. He also had Ojutai Exemplars, which he flipped off of a Temur War Shaman. He had some gross stuff. Game 1, I did manage to take him down. He relied a bit too heavily on the 2 dragon guys, Dragon Sentry. I'll remember the name. They're in my deck from the main event. And I was able to kill them off eventually after going down to, I think, 12 life or so. And he just didn't have a follow-up because he had too many non-creature spells, and I beat him in that game. Game 2 didn't go terribly well. I didn't draw that many creatures, and he drew 2 Center Souls to protect his dragon dudes, and got through for a ton of prowess damage. One turn I went from 19 to 12 just based off of those 2 creatures. Game 3, I got a little bit lucky. He mulled to 5 and was stuck on 2 lands, and I very rapidly beat him. Went 20 to 18 to 13 to 7 to dead. So I beat him on turn 5ish or turn 6, I think. Game 2, I was up against green-black, and it was kind of a removal fest. He had just a ton of removal. He had double flatten, he had ultimate price, he had double reach of shadows. It was basically all of the disgusting black removal that kind of makes black seem a little bit overpowered in this limited format. In addition to that, I flooded like crazy both games. Both games were over by around turn 8 or turn 9, and I had 8 and or 9 mana in both cases, including one game where I mulled. So unfortunately, I lost that one in a very quick 2. Overall, it was okay, though. I got 40 prize tickets out of it, which I was able to convert into a Mirrodin Besieged booster, which goes into the old booster vault for future Crack-a-Pack specials. And it was a fun experience. It was $30 for basically 2 matches, but I was pretty okay with that. So the next event for me, of course, was Saturday morning, bright and early, 9 a.m., the main event, the 9-round Swiss sealed event where you had to go 7-2 or better in order to make day 2, where you would get to draft. So what did I open? Well, in blue, that made me want to go blue and play blue, was Reduced Stature and Aven Surveyor. And that was it. Everything else was Elusive Spell Fists and Contradicts and other cards that I wouldn't terribly want to play. Over in green, we've actually got some good stuff. We've got a Hunt the Weak, an Abzan Beastmaster, a Whisper of the Wilds, a foil Airy Bowmasters, and a Surrak the Hunt Caller. Pretty solid green. Unfortunately, it kind of petered out from there. Formless Nurturing, and then a bunch of sideboard stuff. I had 2 Naturalizes, kind of petered out, unfortunately. Red was a bit of a different story, and I strongly considered red first for a little bit anyways. Now, down here is my unplayable red rare, my mythic rare, the Descent of the Dragons. Up at the top is my very playable red mythic rare, Shaman of the Great Hunt. Unfortunately, green and blue weren't terribly great at supporting that for the activated effect anyways. But there was also a Kolaghan Forerunners, my other rare is a Berserker's Onslaught, Tailslash Mardu Scout, Stormwing Dragon, borderline, and a Tarka Efreet. Pretty solid red stuff there, and I may still toy around with some red decks to see if that might have been the right choice, but I think black-white was the right choice, which I went with. There was, of course, a War Flare if I did want to go red-white. But let's take a look at what I did build. As I said, I built black-white. Let's get all of this in frame here. The glare is going to make it a little bit hard to read, but hopefully I can zoom in on the cards individually. I had a Scour Barons, which obviously helped. My two sideboard cards there, just briefly, were Duress and Fate Forgotten. Fate Forgotten I never had to use because luckily the one guy I played with a Citadel Siege didn't draw it, so I was pretty happy there. But Duress came in here or there when I was up against Prowess decks and Trumpet Blast, what's it called, Volcanic Rush, I think, decks, things like that, and it did some work. In the 1-drop slot, we had good old Typhoid Rats. Over in the 2-drops, we had, let's zoom in here, Battle Brawler, Soul Summons, Herald of Dromoka, and Kolaghan Forerunner. Skirmisher, not Forerunners. Again, all fine. Battle Brawler is probably the best there. And Herald of Dromoka had some good synergy that helped out a little bit. Vigilance for your team is not too shabby, especially when it's on a creature. Down in the 2-drop spells, we've got a Defeat, a Pacifism, another Pacifism, and a Center Soul. Double Pacifism is very nice, let me tell you, especially with a Defeat. I'll come back to that 3-drop spell in a second, because it's an important one. Up there in the 3-drop slot, we've got ourselves a Sandstorm Charger, a Mardu Strike Leader, an Aven Sun Striker, another Sandstorm Charger, Sig Icebreakers, which was a card I put in because I needed a 23rd creature, or 23rd spell, and preferably was a creature, and a Dragon Bell Monk. That's the name I was trying to think of for my last deck. Down in the 3-drop slot, we do have Corpse Weft. Corpse Weft is a bomb. Don't let anybody tell you any differently. It is crazy. It can get super out of control. And as we'll hear about in a match report, people just forget about it. People just forget it's there and what it does. And it works to your advantage quite a bit. Over in the 4-drop spell slot, we've got another duplicate card, and it's Double Flatten. Double Flatten, Double Pacifism is a really good pool, let me tell you. And another Scale Blessing, as I said in my Last Chance trial report. It was a card that was never truly dead, except for a few situations where I was in a lot of trouble and desperately needed a creature and drew it. But there was enough megamorphing going on that, this tended to get me a few counters going on. Up in the 4-drop creature slot, we've got Champion of Erishan and an Alicia's Vanguard. Nothing exciting. However, exciting in our 5-drop slot is Sunscorch Regent, which is surprising that it's a 5-drop, because boy is it powerful. And then finally, we've got ourselves a Reach of Shadows. Let's see if I can zoom out, get the deck back in frame, and give you the match report, if I can decipher it off of my notepad here. So match 1, I was up against what seemed to be an Esper deck. He had blue, black, and white in it. He had both Pristine Skywise and Cunning Breeze Dancer, both blue-white dragons that weren't Ojutai. And he got them out pretty regularly. He was even playing Haven of the Spirit Dragon, and using that to help it out. I managed to win the first game off of Corpse Weft, just making, I think it was an 8-8 at the time, and swinging in a few times with an 8-8 and killing everything. I managed to flatten his dragons a few times, pacify them if they stuck around. Took pretty dominant position in match 1. Match 2, he managed to gain some life somehow. And I'm not sure how, but my notepad here tells me he did. He went up to 26, and he just pinged away in the air. He just pinged away in the air with Misthoof Kieran, and I just couldn't draw enough to stay online. And then game 3, I was stuck on 4 lands the entire game. And the 4th one didn't come until late, and that's going to be a recurring theme for a little bit. I just couldn't draw stuff. I was stuck on white for the longest time, and I top-decked 5 black cards in a row. Wasn't a good way to go out, so I was 0-1 after round 1. Match 2, I was up against a red-green deck, a rather aggressive deck. It had an Atarka Efreet. I was stuck on 3 lands in this game, in game 1, and he just ran over me. He hit me for, I think, 11 in 1 turn, thanks to Atarka Efreet plus 4 other power from something. Game 2, I managed to come back around. I actually drew lands, which did stuff for me. I drew, I think, all 4 of my big removal spells, 2 Pacifisms, 2 Flattens. I didn't see the Reach of Shadows. And Corpse Weft. I managed to make, in this case, I believe it was 2 or 3 2/2s, and then just attacked him, and he didn't have enough blockers. Game 3, I mulled all the way down to 5. I had no lands, and then I had 1 land, and then I kept the 2-lander, and I was stuck on 3 the entire game. So I was 0-2 at the end of round 2, and I decided, well, I didn't decide, I was debating whether or not I should just drop. Whether or not I should just join a side event, join something else, and just get on with my day. But I didn't. I stuck with it because I knew the deck was good. The deck looks awesome. So I went into round 3. Round 3, I was up against a black-red deck. And it was relatively dashy. Kolaghan Skirmishers, Alicia's Vanguards, things like that. And that kind of went against him. He didn't really establish his board, and he just lost to multiple threats. I had down my Skirmisher, my Herald, my Battle Brawler, Dragon Bell Monk, and I just finished him off with little guys and just lots of them on the ground. Game 2, I managed to remove a Boltwing Marauder pretty handily. He slapped it down into 4 mana that I had on tapped, and I just immediately flattened it, and that was basically his game plan at that point. I was in a little bit of trouble getting up to there. I was at 9 life when he put that down. But I immediately followed up killing that with the Champion of Arishin, which he allowed to live for far longer than he should have, and I ended up at 22 life at the end of that game, and he went down to 1 when he started blocking things eventually and then died. He really undervalued how important lifelink was to me at that point, and it solidly got me back into the game, because I was dead to, you know, a Sarkhan's Rage and 4 damage. So, finally, I had won a match. I was 1-2 at the end of round 3, feeling pretty good, wondering if I could potentially just keep winning for the rest of the day. Of course, at this point, I had to win the next 6 matches in order to make day 2. If I lost 1, I was out. So anyways, I moved on to match 4, and let me find it on my notepad here. There we go. I was up against a black-green deck, and again, it was pretty darn dashy. He also had a Mardu Strike Leader. He also had a Sirach the Hunt Caller, which he was playing. And, yeah, he was pretty solid. Thankfully, very thankfully, I just simply out-removaled him. None of his threats lived. Sirach died a very quick death to flatten. I pacifismed a lot of his other big threats. He played, it wasn't a Sprinting Warbrute, that was in the red-black deck. What was it? It was the Stampeding Elkherd. He played that down, pacified it, just really handily took care of him, and took him down pretty quickly. I took a grand total of 1 damage across 2 games, and just took him down. Removal was the name of the game with my deck. It just dominated. So I was 2-2. I was at 50% finally. Looking pretty good. Moving on to match 5 I was up against. I believe it was red-green. Yeah, it was a red-green deck again. Again, relatively dashy. He used Scream Reach Brawler to a lot of effect. He had a Sprinting Warbrute. He also had a Stampeding Elkherd. And yeah, game 1, I didn't see very much. I think he must have been stuck on something, and I just kind of took him down with normal damage getting through. It went 20, 14, 8 dead for him as far as life totals go. Game 2, he managed to stabilize a bit better. I used up my removal a little bit early, and Atarka Afreet came in for just the massive damage that it does. Game 3 ended up being very grindy. We were matching each other threat for threat in such a way that neither of us really could attack. Neither of us had profitable attacks, and so the board just kept getting more and more out of control, and he dropped the Stampeding Elkherd, which looked pretty bad for me. Luckily, I managed to kill that, but then he decided to start getting greedy. He was getting a lot of creatures, and I was still stuck mostly filling the board with 2/2s, and he was having 3/3s and 4/4s, and etc. And he went for a very greedy attack, because I had Corpse left on the board. He went for a very greedy attack. He tapped everything for this attack. So what did I do? I threw everything in front of everything, even if it was a complete chump block, because that filled my graveyard. At the end of that turn, he was tapped out. All of his creatures were tapped, and I had 6 creatures in the graveyard. And guess what his life total was? His life total was 12. So at the end of his turn, I tapped 2 mana to make a 12/12, swung in with it, and killed him. People forget about Corpse Weft. So I was 3-3. pretty happy with myself. Or sorry, not 3-3. I was 3-2. Very happy with myself. I only had 4 more to win to make day 2. So I went into match 6, and this was a really close match. My opponent flooded out in match 1, game 1, and I just absolutely trounced him. Game 2, he got a little bit more aggressive. He was playing red-white. Red-white Volcanic Rush with Secure the Wastes. And that's what just destroyed me in Game 2. End of his turn, he made, I think, 5 or 6 soldiers. Next turn, Volcanic Rush. My blocks did not matter when everything had +2/+0 and trample. Game 3, finally, I decided I needed to aggressively kill his stuff. I was flattening 2/2s. I was pacifisming 2/2s because I knew that if he drew Volcanic Rush and I had allowed him to have 4 what looked like little piddly threats, they would become pretty darn big. And it seemed to be working. Eventually, he was finally out of cards. And we were at, I believe, I was 11 life and he was 7. I was kind of in control. At that point, he drew Colligan and played it. I Reach of Shadowed it, killing it right away. And then he returned it to his hand. I can't remember how. I can't remember which card it was exactly, but he returned it to his hand and then drew a card. The next turn, I played Sibsig Icebreakers, the card that I hated having in my deck. And I had to discard a card. I discard a Pacifism because I had another one in my hand. He discarded, I think it was a land that he drew with the Colligan. Or sorry, that's actually not the right way around. I duressed him, seeing the Colligan and the land, or it wasn't a land, it was just some spell. And I duressed away the spell, of course, because I have to. That's my only choice. I can't pick the creature. Then I played Sibsig Icebreakers, forcing him to discard Colligan. I managed to deal with Colligan twice, the second time in a really roundabout, strange way. Unfortunately, that wasn't enough because I could not draw significant threats to get through. And again, Secure the Wastes got me. Teamed up with a War Brute. So that put me at 3-3. It was 6 p.m. by that point. I had been there for 10 hours. I was out of the contention for being invited to day 2. So I decided to call it quits. I had 3 matches left, but I wasn't terribly feeling it. I was tired. I was hungry. Plus, if I left right then and there, my parking was going to be like $7 or $8 cheaper. So I figured, why not? I'll just head out. But yeah, that was my main event GP experience, and I didn't really decide to do any other events. I had had a very long day, and as you guys had heard, Montreal had worn me out a little bit, so I just decided to pack it in for the night. So that's my quick recap. Not necessarily quick. I think this ended up being almost half an hour. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that, though. But that's my recap of Grand Prix Montreal. If you've never been to a Grand Prix because you felt intimidated by it, you didn't know if you were quite at that level, don't be intimidated. It's really fine. Tons of people there. I heard about it being their first Grand Prix experience, even their first real big competitive experience. It's a really fun environment. Beyond that, you don't even have to play in the main event. Tons of people were there simply to play in all the side events. There are on-demand events. So just like on Magic Online, when the 8th person signs up to play Legacy, 8 people play a little Legacy tournament with prizes. There's Legacy, there's Modern, there's Two-Headed Giant, there's Commander, there's Standard. There are on-demand drafts. There's usually a happy hour where drafts are $10 for an hour. There are big scheduled events, big sealed events, big standard tournaments to win boxes or even bigger prizes like that. Every Sunday, there's a big event where the winner gets to actually go to Wizards to play a tournament at some point in the next coming year, I believe. Basically, a winner from every Grand Prix gets to go to this big event at Wizards. Plus, you get to chat with R&D and just a cool little prize there. So definitely go to a Grand Prix if you get the experience, if you get the chance, if they're anywhere remotely close to you. I mean, I drove 7.5 hours to Montreal to play in this event. I'm sure there's probably one closer to you. If you get the chance, definitely check them out. But I hope you guys enjoyed this recap. It was kind of fun making it. It was fun walking around with a camcorder and recording a bunch of footage there at the beginning. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. If you do have any questions, comments, or suggestions, you can find me on Twitter at @TheManaLeek. That's L-E-E-K, like the vegetable, not the card. And of course, you can find me on Facebook as well at Facebook.com/TheManaLeek. the Mana Leak. You've already found me here on YouTube. You've got the comment section down below. As well, if you like the videos, you should click those little thumbs up icons to let me know that you like the videos, let the world know that you like the videos, and keep my videos rising up through the ranks. As well, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, you should consider it. There's a subscribe button below each video and one in the outro of each video. That'll keep you up to date on all the latest Crack-a-Pack Tuesdays, Wacky Wednesdays, Spiky Saturdays, and any other random videos that pop up here or there, like this one. As always, if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you all next time.